The Witcher, Hexer, Chapter 11. Order cannot be changed. New otherworldly creatures were popping up all the time, after the emergence of Skiatakupata and the descent of Trilzum upon the earth. Dooney had noticed some things that he could have swore were eyes on stalks that looked like they sprouted up off the ground from nowhere. Pavetta touched them and felt an oncoming vision. These stalks were living creatures and not plants, although they had plant qualities. Like the stalks of corn mixed with the joints of bamboo, these monsters had ring-like lines going up and down the vertical lines, wrapping around the cylindrical shapes like bands or bracelets. These were the actual movable joints of their singular limbs. On one side, going up and down, were these spherical orbs that were ocular, yet not actual eyes in the retinal sense. Their components were more like the eye of the center of the brain, mixed with projection of senses to relay images in their singular minds. These stick-like creatures were like walking snakes in their form, but moved like scorpions' tails. They had slip-cover back skin that their wings could tuck in for protection, and when flying in use, the wings made the creature appear like a headless dragonfly. Their faces were hidden in the ends at the top of the creature, like inside of a tube. It could retract like a turtle's head, and their mouths wrapped around their singular neck with angled, turned fangs in a whirl. With their bodies, they could spiral around the necks of their prey like a pastry roll, and with their mouths, they sucked out their victims' blood from the arteries. Pavetta didn't know that these creatures were dangerous because she thought they were foreign plants, not beasts. Indeed, they were cosmic beasts of destruction that had come with the descent of Trilzum from the far constellations. Dooney was apprehensive with the things and warned Pavetta not to touch them, but her curiosity insisted that she put her hands on the strangely beautiful orbs. Soon as she touched them, the incoming vision of their existence rushed to her mind's eye from the creatures which she connected with. Somehow, she knew that this would happen subconsciously, even if she didn't think she knew. Pavetta felt the yearning of their primal spirits as she touched one after the other, as if she was consoling or comforting the alien monsters. These foreign things were so very different compared to earthly organisms, from their biological makeup down to their natural behavior, that did not fit in with all the creatures of the earth. This is why they mimicked the plant life at the time of arrival. Pavetta felt their urgency to feed off the blood of life because their home was destroyed, where their version of water, their liquid life source, had been obliterated by the carelessness of Trilzum when he used their resources to feed his own needs. When Trilzum would go to their home world to bathe, he would absorb this precious liquid that they would drink from during half of their time during each day. Trilzum, as his powers grew stronger from his raping of their resources, soaked up all their water, which was similar to earth creatures' blood, in particularly humans' blood. So Pavetta saw through the feeling, through the connection she made with the creature's mind's eyes. The princess could not come up with a satisfactory solution for an alternative. She knew that she couldn't give these creatures an answer to their question if there was something to be negotiated. Then she remembered the many evil sorcerers that were the reptilian druids. Yennefer had reached her that night and appeared in her dreams, so that there would be no risk or chance of the order of her spells to be erased by physical tracking. Even this method of spellcasting was dangerous because if she did it more than once, trying to reach Pavetta and Dooney again, then the chances were that the Master Druid Sorceress Kiatakupata would have caught the signal with Trilzum's help through his evil cosmic powers. What a monstrous problem, but it was worth everything for Yennefer, so things could progress in the light of goodness for all of them who followed her and Geralt of Rivia in their convictions. With the touching of these creatures, Pavetta the Powerful was thrown back by use of that clairvoyance. She could withstand so much mimicked power from the creatures that it deceived her and threw off her good judgment. The last thing Pavetta saw reminded her of the dream she had and what Yennefer told her about how she would be reminded of the dream world visitation through her dream spell. It all hit Pavetta at once, and the last thing she had seen was the devastating blows of Geralt the Witcher chopping these creatures down. The shock frightened Pavetta as she realized what she was touching was not foreign plants, but elusive monsters from beyond the stars. This small box on the ground was touched by the toe of Dooney's boot. As he shuffled it by accident, he brushed over it again with the bottom of his foot and realized this was no rock. The thing looked like a picture frame almost, or a mirror, but it was neither. This was something he knew nothing of that came from the advanced civilization at the time that was reaching out to him, although he did not yet realize. Later it would occur to him after much harrowing struggles through their journey. When Dooney's boot stumbled across this small square contraption, which was a type of device, the signal went through the electrical current in the ground. This was a type of conductor that had its own power supply through deep sea materials whose minerals had living cell components that microscopically, like miniature coral and crustaceans within strands of living plasma, ran through the ground into the undercurrents of stored water in the forest earth, running off down to the shoreline of the beach where they were headed. This was secretly, silently placed there by their new helper from the sea. There were such devices in the hidden parts of the world that were constructed far from the forest lands of the continent where Pavetta and Dooney were from. In these furthest reaches of the world, advancements in crafts building surpassed the large continent, since they were stuck in evil cosmic darkness for well over 1,000 years, as the ones who fought for good, like Geralt of Rivia, battled against these types of otherworldly monsters that came after the conjunction of the spheres. There was some good news mixed in there for Pavetta and Dooney amongst all the bad news that was following them and continued to follow them. After learning of all the new curses that had befallen them, Dooney the Hedgehog Knight and Pavetta, the banished queen of the forest, had been energized in spirit by the hopes of good tidings that were on their way. Yennefer had let Dooney know in his dream that there were more Witchers who would be along the way, who were like brothers to Geralt of Rivia. If Dooney could call out their shared sigil name of the White Wolf that Geralt embodied as the Lone White Wolf, being most legendary and powerful, then those like brothers would be obliged to answer back with the question why. This would open up the opportunity for the reciprocated help between discovered Witchers with an alliance between Pavetta and Dooney. The message was clear in Dooney's mind, and he knew that he could get their help if only he could be so lucky to run into even one of these traveling White Wolf Witchers. Dooney knew that most often the Witchers would travel with dark-hooded cloaks and robes covering their white hair, sigils, and yellow eyes. These three things were always the dead giveaways to anyone along the Witcher's path and anyone who would cross their path would know who they were dealing with if a witcher released these easy means of identification, especially the white wolves who had recognizable swords that were crafted rarely by the best designers in all the land, exceeding the quality of any other blacksmiths. These men were the witchers themselves, but here is the different account of the witchers and their hidden story. The Vipers. The Vipers were visited by ancient celestial beings who were neither benevolent nor malevolent, although, if a judge had to decide, they would be forced to categorize these beings as malevolent ones from the extinct constellations, since the knowledge they gifted the Vipers was used for death and not for life. Their intention was never known, as these embodied celestial visitors of the first Viper Witchers never explained if they were giving their gifts of knowledge for the sake of preserving life or taking life. The most commonly shared thought about them is that these visitors gave the choice to these certain Viper Witchers. Ultimately, the whole concept was a derivative of one's own perception of life and death, thus establishing individual morals and values within the Viper Witcher tribe. One of the three bringers of knowledge stayed behind after the other two left, and he became the father of the second generation of Viper Witchers. If you could not guess already, it shall be known that indeed the visitors from the obliterated constellation were escapees from the other side of the void. Yes, they were serpent people, mostly resembling upright human bodies with arms of a man, only with the head of a viper and the lower half of a dragon lizard. Their skin was translucent, as it could appear as human or as plant-like, but its actual appearance was similar to dark green alligator skin mixed with the skin of a viper. Their legs were thick and bowed, as if they were lifelong horse riders. One of the three otherworldly visitors of the Viper Witchers did not mingle with the human women because the serpent man was faithful, loyal, and true, not to a woman of his kind, but to his race of creatures. He thought it wrong to breed with any species but his own from his world, even if his world and all living creatures inhabiting the ancient constellation were swallowed up in the void of the giant black hole vortex. The other two did take wives, and it was only through their ability to appear as humans they were able to obtain human women to make their wives, giving each of the two serpent men sons to become Witcher warrior hunters. The first generation Viper Witchers raised these two sons after the one father killed the other in a bout of jealousy. The disagreement led to deep resentments because the one father talked of going away to follow the one who left, while the other insisted on staying. Both father vipers saw themselves as righteous in their own right, and could not be moved in their position concerning these matters. The history over time has been unclear, as there's been different accounts, but the one thing that is certain about the Viper Witcher history is that in these times of Pavetta and Duni, the specific type who wore the mysterious viper sigils around their necks were there. Things had to be done without speaking of moves, or else the power of evil would have picked up the plans through the counteractive spells between Yennefer and the druidic underworld creature who called itself S. Trilsum was busy with Queen Cyree, while Geralt and his band of misfits were off on adventures with Yennefer as they went riding on an incredible series of paths through her spiral vortex portal spells. This left Pavetta and Duni on their own for a while until they could get to the boat that waited for them at the beach's shore. As the newlyweds went on in the direction they knew best to potentially meet a witcher along the way, they had to fight off the weird creatures that tried to attack them. Those things fled once Pavetta let out her incredible scream that shattered their orb receptors. The damage she caused to them made the creatures hostile and unpredictable, like a rabid intensity that changed their behavior dramatically. Since these otherworldly creatures who were left alive could not properly see, for lack of a better word, there was a new sense of urgency that changed their decision making into that of manic, impulsive, stressful worry. Many were killed, and Dooney really thought, as did Pavetta, that they had seen the last of them, thinking they had killed all of those weird monsters, but in the intensity of their strong offensive attacks, most of the creatures hidden behind the many others had flown away damaged and bitterly angered. S was nowhere to be found because the druidic creature of the underworld was staying within its hidden place built in the deep forest valley canyon. S had created, with a powerful series of spells through the most powerful web of hexations, a hidden place to be the creature's chamber of seeing, like that of Yennefer, only twistedly perverse and utterly sickening. The vile creature was able to spy on everyone through a trick obtained through others' eyes. Since the air was not safe from the toxins Trilzum's emissions put out into the forest, this created a type of misty fog that was going back and forth from the leaves and pine needles as they collected the morning dew. Then, as the day went on with the temperature changes and varied humidity levels, the poisoned water floated around the forest wilderness, infecting every creature's eyes that were not protected by Yennefer's counteractive spells put in place for all she knew to hex into safety. Not only were many innocent animal creatures of the forest infected through their eyes, but those damaged ones that left the attack from Pavetta and Dooney. This was a terrifying thing, as the creatures already were made more dangerous. Then, with this new layer of power that had been put in place over the evil cosmic monsters, the Dark Master Druid could see them, through the eyes of them too, and not just the seemingly harmless animals of the forest. What a dangerous power this was for anyone who had to combat this secretive method. Who could ever stand a chance against this type of warfare? Pavetta and Dooney together had to get help of many powerful armies. The war of monsters and men was being waged. Little did they know then, other than being aware of the malevolent ones and their plan, the actual hardships that were coming. Pavetta and Dooney had an idea of what they knew from all they had learned, but ideas are different than things as they happen. Pavetta's powers were accurate in visions, but not in predictions. She could not guess everything that would happen, only see what would be revealed to her. With Yennefer's help, her powers of clairvoyance grew to peak potential, only this saddened Pavetta, since the need was great in her mind to see more. The sadness changed her along the way and kept her silent, and in silence she remained, unless she needed to use her strong voice to destroy monsters. She did as Dooney went with Pavetta. The couple encountered many rare monsters who were called forth secretly by Master Druid S in his secret dark arts chamber within the deepest hidden parts of the forest valleys. S got to see the forest through every eye of every creature. Although the animals of the forest were not mentally manipulated, the monsters were. Being calibrated with their same primal instincts to kill and feast on human flesh and blood, this was a simple spell to put in place that was proven to be effective 100% of the time with these kinds of dark spells. Once the connection was made between the higher intelligence from the power brain within S's mind, nothing more needed to be done other than to direct and navigate the primal instincts within the vicious beasts' minds, as they were one-track minds no matter what. This is how they were created. through thirst for blood and hunger for flesh, nothing more, and certainly nothing less. These otherworldly monsters, not of this earth, were only living to kill and eat, with little rest, only to wake and do it all again, shitting out their enemies. As Trilson traversed the earth with ease, going from Queen Cyree in the deep sea to his own throne in the deep Forest Valley Canyon in a moment's time, Pavetta and Dooney had to take days for their journey. Trilson would first seem slow, as he would float slowly, but when he was not commanding people to follow him on ground with horses, he could move like a shooting star when he was going alone from one place to the other. He kept his throne hidden in secret so that he might stay untraceable, same as Yennefer the sorceress did with her secret seeing chamber. Neither of them knew that they were aligned as polar opposites of dark and light within the dark world of hexwork. There were opposite forces in play that kept the magic balance intact between the warring sides. In these moments were shifts of power through division which led to falls of once strong evils, and the coming together through great loss, abandonment, and retreat which led to the greatest rebuilding movement between non-evil civilizations for thousands of years. Including creatures along with the pre-human peoples, no other alliance had ever happened like this to compare it to. The old queen of the forest, Pavetta's mother, Calanth of Sintra, had been reduced to a pawn for Skiathukupata to use, doing as he willed. The new king and queen could not reign in the rightful place, so Pavetta and Dooney became king and queen of a better kingdom. Maybe not in the place they wanted to be originally residing in the forest palace, but what they had waiting for them was a palace beyond their wildest dreams. There were pieces of the otherworldly continents that had crashed into the sea, making islands that rested on top of each other, as well as large coral bodies in a giant reef. These together acted as gigantic steps within their kingdom, and up to their palace in the middle of the open ocean, half a world away from the large continent Dooney and Pavetta had left. With Yennefer, Geralt of Rivia learned more of the history of the Old Forest Castle family curse through the story of the cursed Rumsilia, who was executed for her chaos. Rumsilia, the half-elf, half-dwarf during the First Kingdom Age, had brought Skiathukupata into the light of the above-ground world. Deep thought came over Geralt like a sweeping flood. He had been overcome with exhaustion after his travels through the many looping vortex portals. Borch and his daughters Tia and Vea were occupied with Askier, as he had shown them a place to rest in a nearby inn before they died of exhaustion. So Yennefer and Geralt were alone together in their vortex portal travels through hyperhexation. Soon as Geralt got the chance to sit and think, between the draining method of magical travel, he fell into a deep meditative state, sitting on a rock, and Yennefer thought the Witcher had fallen asleep just before they were advancing to the point of the hidden gates through the passageway of the higher realm. They had reached Divinicalicata, the otherworldly land orbiting the earth in those days, mistaken for a floating continent, since it was technically a continent of another world. Divinicalicata. It is as majestic as I had envisioned in my childhood dreams. Geralt of Rivia snapped out of his stupor to open his eyes in wonder at the giant floating land. Yennefer and Geralt were so close, they were under the illusion that this was a flat land, although they remembered what the shape of it was in the starry night sky, once they had enough of a view to look upon it while approaching through the vortex portal looping. Yennefer agreed, me too. She spoke like a young girl taken back, as Geralt spoke like he was a little boy again in his gone by not forgotten home, land of Rivia. I'm glad it's just you and I together here, Yennefer. This is too much feeling for words. Geralt held himself back from expressing his true feelings, keeping his sense of love inward. Then don't ruin it. Take your rest. Yennefer stayed cold-hearted as she needed time to heal. Geralt gave a single nod and looked downward in shame, as he knew in that moment between them that Yennefer had been hurt by his departure, even if she didn't show it so much before. The revealing of this emotion through subtly The revealing of this emotion, though subtly, pleased him, as Geralt knew, without a doubt, that she loved him. This revealing of this emotion, through subtlety, pleased him, as Geralt knew without a doubt that she loved him. There was just no time for the affection they both craved in these times, and so they had to move on up towards the otherworldly land in the sky. Morning had arrived, and the night passed the day. Geralt had much to think about on that protected magic journey with Yennefer. He thought of the Viper Witchers who he never mingled with in his long past. Learning from Yennefer made Geralt of Rivia curious of them. Yennefer and Geralt knew that there was one master swordsman among them, and he was a true child of surprise among the Vipers. Confusion of his roots made the half-serpent man a loner like Geralt, and he was alone most of the time, away from the rest of the Viper Witchers. This nameless Witcher had not known which of the two visitors was his father. Either it was the one or the other, either the killer visitor or the murdered visitor. Geralt's stomach filled with blood from incredible stress held in for so many lifetimes, being reminded of his childhood trauma he could never deal with, so he locked it away, stored deep within his heart of hearts. Yennefer noticed his bloating and put her hand on Geralt's stomach just under his sternum. She felt the heaviness of his heart that had sunk into his stomach down to his guts, resting on his intestines. Her hand began to radiate these types of contrasting waves, between ones that looked like steam but were not, and colors of glowing energy. The two completely different frequencies went in an X-cross way that gave an unusual illusion through the lens of the human eye. This appeared to be a tiny galaxial formation, like a miniature astronomical birth of a universe. Surely Yennefer used an incredible amount of her energy by summoning a great deal of concentrated magical power. She too became exhausted. Come here, Yennefer, rest with me, just for a moment. We will gather strength together for the task ahead. Geralt took off his shirt and unrobed Yennefer as she helped him. She came to him without a word or a smile, only eager eyes looking into each other's broken souls. They warmed each other under a blanket as Geralt was inside of Yennefer. The two fell asleep for only 20 minutes after the relief they experienced being together. After this, Geralt of Rivia and Yennefer, the Master Sorceress, were refreshed like new, with a shared relaxed energy, like they could do anything together and face anything that would come their way. Yennefer had healed Geralt's internal bleeding, and in turn, Geralt healed a cancer that was forming inside her, with his potency of semen that carried mutated seed, which ate away her cancer, dying in the process, then flushed away by the intense pressure. Yennefer, through her clairvoyance spell she often used, especially most often when around Geralt, showed her through the feeling of healing inside her what had been done, and she hid her tears by going forward ahead of him, same as the pieces of floating land that had turned into smaller rocks like submerged islands from the other two collided continents, The one still floating acted as steps. There was a reversal of time that would occur, then a flash forward from the offset balance of time to the broken constellations. This gave memories of what had happened already and what would happen, when actually things were happening at the same time. Things that happened, things that were happening, and things that were about to happen were rushing over the minds of Geralt and Yennefer. They didn't understand completely, but had a good idea as to why this strange occurrence was happening. Yennefer especially understood that the conjunction of the spheres, along with the chaos Trilsum created, was the root cause of this unnatural occurrence. The orbiting land called Divinicalicata was a place that should not have been in the Earth's atmosphere, throwing off the balance of time and giving great waves that rocked the Earth back and forth, ripping the land, shifting continents around. The pernicious S was letting in Trilsum at his own will into the chamber where he had built originally for the private seeing that the dark magic permitted him alone. This opened up a curse that would be thrown back on them and would infuriate Queen Cyree, the Queen of the Sea. A type of dizziness from temporary vertigo was affecting Yennefer, and she didn't immediately understand until she searched deeper, digging into the spells within her memory to conjure the correct methods of order. Like a puzzle, her mind worked in meticulously methodical esotericism. Jumping along these small floating islands in light of the morning sun was intensely difficult, even if Yennefer was using magic to help them with their feet and legs every step of the way. Once they reached the top of Divinicalicata, they couldn't believe that they had actually been able to achieve this incredible task. Right when Yennefer and Geralt felt that they would never reach it, suddenly they were there, with the land of Divinicalicata under their feet. It felt like a dream they had visited before in reality. That's precisely what had happened. This was a revisiting, and the overcasting of spells had given the grace of forgetting due to what had happened before. Many devastating events occurred when Yennefer and Geralt were there the first time. Once they tried to leave, monsters came and attacked the company they tried to bring along, killing most of them. This was such a tragedy. Yennefer was crushed and devastated, along with Geralt the Witcher. Monsters came from the high places of Divinicalicata like they had been there the whole time, waiting for the right moment to attack the crowd of different pre-human races, the very second they were all gathered at the edge of the continent. In the one time and chance the monsters had to take advantage of the opportunity, they took it and seized with malice. No other time did such a thing happen since the founding elders came to inhabit the land of Divinicalicata those hundreds of years ago, surpassing 1,000 by countless hundreds. The time had come for all the different peoples to gather and go with Yennefer and Geralt. But the first time they came to get them to bring them down, most of them fell to their death into the ocean, or so they thought. Something beautiful happened that none of them could have ever imagined. Although a few of the falling people did meet their death, as could plainly be seen, while their bodies smashed against the lower, smaller, fragmented island-like pieces of the lower collided continents. Spells rang out in repercussiveness throughout the time ever since that have been a means to the eventual victory that they now had achieved. Geralt went berserk once the memories rushed over him. As the monsters came raining down from the hilltops, he remembered the time when Yennefer had first brought him there. Then Yennefer was shown the silver lining that previously was not revealed. 'This was a mental connection from Pavetta. 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 'This was Pavetta had first made a connection with her newfound sea friend through the old white whales that had the most impressive mental capacity and range of telepathicism. The device that Dooney had stumbled over was the link. Pavetta was showing Yennefer that those fallen elves, dwarves, gnomes, giants, and humans from Divinicalicata had gone through whirlpools unlike any other. Normally, the impact would have killed anyone who would fall into the ocean from such a distance, and even if someone could survive this fall into water, the temperatures would have killed them anyway. So in Geralt and Yennefer's minds, they were remembering what was certain death to all those who fell. This wasn't the case. These white whales were able to warm the waters through a mental technique, as well as produce these whirlpools that could only be described as magical. Through this incredible series of miracles, the fallen who were supposed to be added to Geralt and Yennefer's army were added to Dooney and Pavetta's army. They were taken to the palace that waited for them, Dooney and Pavetta, as they traveled on their way to the boat.